you.
Yep.
Yeah, so what he said was is he's looking for the .h files and the .cc. Hmm.
Yeah.
He didn't ask me about the NEDs, but
Mhm.
yeah, if we can go over a little bit, I don't think we have to go
Sure.
over a lot, but maybe go over the H's and the CC's.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I guess maybe just at like a really high level, these file extensions, the .h and the .cc file extensions, they're like C++ files, right? And so
Mhm.
the .h file is I think what they call a header file. Some people call it an interface file. But basically, it's like it's like a class for Java, essentially. It's a specification in a lot of regards. It's like we'll have these objects and they'll have these methods on them basically. And so uh, the CC files, however, so the H files are like interface or specification files. The
Mhm.
CC files are implementation files. This is really similar to the way that OCaml works. There's like .mli files for interface and .ml for the implementation. I think it's similar in C. I'm just not as familiar with the C programming language. Um,
Okay.
but either way, basically, it's like you have specification files and you have implementation files. So in the .h files, all we're ever saying is like these are the allowable methods on the class or whatever. Like we're defining these classes and what methods they have, and like are they private, are they public, are they protected methods, that sort of stuff. So that's
Mhm.
all that's happening in the H files. So they're not super interesting in the sense of like nothing really happens in the H files. Where all of the code is in those CC files, the implementations. And then in these CC files, we actually say like, oh, so in the H file, we said that my queue was going to have an initialize method. So like now we actually say what the initialize method does and actually like lay it out in code, right? And so
Mhm.
here, this set name thing, just to talk about the initialize method real quick, the set name thing is just like an Omnet specific thing to tell it about this queue thing that we're working with.
Okay.
So I think this queue without the quotes around it, right? That queue, if I remember correctly, it's like an Omnet specific type. I think it's one of these like C array or CQ. I forget what the type name is. But it's like a type that's specific to like this Omnet ecosystem. And so this set name is like a special method on this specific type that basically just allows you to like give it a name so that you can use it in other places basically. So that's all we're really doing in this initialize method. So like effectively what is the initialize thing doing? Not really all that much. It's not doing any computation, at least. Things get interesting when we start talking about this handle method, or sorry, handle message method here. Um, so the handle message one, this is the one. So first of all, this handle message method on my queue. This is something that gets called every time there's a message to handle, like an incoming message to this my queue module. Right. So, sorry, maybe I jumped a little bit too far into the weeds. And so let's take like one step back. Uh, Taking one step back. So we're defining this module, right? And module is like, okay, it's like Omnet plus plus terminology, but it's kind of in alignment with what we mean by module in a lot of different programming languages. But what we're doing here is we're defining this my queue module. And you can, even see it literally, yeah, it literally says it on line 18. And that is like an Omnet++ specific thing to register this MyQ module that we are defining with like the Omnet++ runtime. So we can actually do simulations that involve this module. We have to tell Omnet about this module that we're defining. It's a little bit weird that you have to do that, but I guess it's basically just like by default, these C++ modules are just hidden from Omnet++. But if you put that define module declaration in there, then that like exposes that module to Omnet++, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, it does.
Okay, cool. So that define module thing is not like it's there just so Omnet++ will know about this code that we're writing in this file. That's really all it is. It's not doing anything else. But okay, so now like going back sort of into the weeds. So we're defining this MyQ module. And basically, all of these Omnet++ modules need to have these two methods. Like at least they need to have these two methods. So the initialize method basically is like, what is Omnet++ gonna do when it like instantiates this module? So that's when it's gonna call this initialize thing. And so here we said, basically, there's not really a whole lot that happens. Something internally happens with Omnet++, but it's not really that exciting. Now the handle message method, this is like the other one that you must define for one of these Omnet++ modules. And this one is about, so remember, the way everything works in Omnet++ is like you have all these different modules, and they're essentially like their own little universe, except they have these like bidirectional message passing between all of the modules, and we establish like what modules get to talk to what modules in the NED files. So we don't need to talk about that right now, but that's where all of those links are declared basically. And so like what we're doing here in this handle message method is we're just saying like, hey, if MyQ is connected to some other module, then that module can pass messages to MyQ, right? The way everything works in Omnet++ is via message passing. So I need to tell the MyQ module how it's going to handle the messages that it receives. And so that's what this handle message method is about.
Okay.
All right. So
It's connected
yeah,
to this, right? It's connected on this.
Yeah, so the myq.ned is this is what is establishing all of the different possible well, in a way it's saying just for the myq module, these are okay, so we're calling them gates, right? But gates are basically just like I don't know, in a sense it's almost like an outlet in the wall, right? It's like okay, I have an outlet that has this name and it's like an input thing, so like you can get messages that come in through that gate, for lack of better words. But then you also have these output gates, and this is like how the MyQ module can send messages to some other module, right? So we gave them very specific names to kind of be very suggestive, like who those messages are going to go to, right? So like that toSync gate, it's an output gate. Okay, so this is basically saying MyQ has the ability to send messages to the sync. Probably that's why we named it toSync. But point being is there's an output gate on the MyQ module, which allows us to like send messages to somebody, but it's not even clear who we actually send those messages to until we actually set up the network.ned thing, because that's where we link all of these different gates together. So just because these have like specific names doesn't necessitate anything. But we gave them very suggestive names so that when we go to like the full network topology and we do all of the, like links between all of the different modules, then we can just say like, oh, well, my queue has this output gate called toSync. Clearly, I should make that link up to an input gate on the sync module, right? So now if we were to go to sync.ned, we should see some input gate, and we're probably calling it from queue. Yeah, and that's exactly what we called it. And then just to say something about the square brackets thing. So that gate is not only like a single input point, it's like it's like an array of input gates, right? And it's like an array that's parameterized by this gate size parameter that we have here. Which, okay, it's 3 because if you remember, we have like the low, medium, high priority
Yeah.
tasks, whatever you want to call them. But basically, we're just saying like, okay, this input gate for sync is an array of 3 input gates, really. And we're doing that because we want like 1 input for high priority stuff, 1 for medium, and 1 for low.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Cool. So that's what the gate parts are about. So the gates are just like, do I have the ability to accept messages like coming into this module, or do I have the ability to like output messages from this module? And in a way, it kind of makes sense to call this module sync, right? Usually sync means like stuff goes there and never comes out. And so it only has an input gate, right? So there is no output gate on the sync module, and that makes sense because like that's where all of these messages kind of go to like be vaporized or whatever.
Okay. And these are implemented in the sync.h file, right? Or
Yes. So we'll
oh, that's
say
CC.
how sync is going to handle messages. But like the messages themselves could be implemented in some other module, right? Like the MyQ module, for example.
Mm-hmm. Or yeah, because I don't think there's a sync.cc.
Yeah, so sync.cc, we're only gonna say how the sync module is handling messages though. And again, you always need these 2 methods in every module that's like an Omnet++ module. So anytime you want to do this, like what they did on line 18 there, define module sync, you always need at least 2 methods, this initialize and this handle message. Because the Omnet runtime needs to know what it has to do when it creates this particular module. So that's what the initialize thing is about. The handle message thing, again, is like when this module is receiving messages, what does it do with those messages? And, the sync basically is just there to consume things. And okay, it does a tiny bit more than just consuming them, but you can see on line 30, like delete message is basically all it does with the message. It just consumes it, and it's just now gone from the simulation, basically. But it's also doing some kind of like statistics stuff, and that's what logging and statistics basically is the other stuff there. Right. So yeah.
And what we were doing here, because I forgot. I remember we did this, but I don't
Yeah,
remember what.
I if I remember correctly, all of that stuff was about we're like tracking the lifetime of each of the messages that the sync module is getting. And basically with the expectation that a message that was given to a high priority queue should have the lowest lifetime. A message given to a medium priority queue should have like a medium lifetime, and the messages given to the low priority queue should have like the most highest, greatest, whatever you want to say. lifetime, the largest lifetime.
Okay. And that's what the emitting is doing?
Yeah, so emit is like telling this lifetime signal thing about this lifetime of this object, basically.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I don't specifically remember what this emit thingy does, but it's some way to tell the thing that's like recording statistical information about this new like piece of data that you got.
Okay. Makes sense now.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So
I
that so
think the
that's really
next,
all the sync module is doing. It's just like receives a message, records the lifetime somewhere in this like statistics collection that it's doing, and then just deletes it. That's it. It doesn't pass that message on or send a message to anybody else.
okay, yeah. I was a little bit confused in the sync, and I think that's one of the questions that the teacher asked when I met with him.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
interesting because
yeah.
we didn't really do much with sync, so that would make sense why you weren't very familiar with what the sync module was doing.
Yeah, I think it was like one of his random questions that he asked me specifically, I think, because I checked with my other classmates and it was a different question for each
Mm,
um
hmm.
student.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's the sync. I can
Yes.
get rid of
Oh,
this.
so
Get
yeah,
rid of
so does that answer the questions that you had about the sync module?
yes, yes.
Okay. Okay, cool.
I think the my cue, I think we went
Yeah.
over.
Yeah, and we can say like more precisely what this handle message method is doing if that's important.
Yeah, sure, why not?
Okay. So with oh yeah, so let me oh actually could we go back to the network.net and then can you look at the diagram view of or design rather view of network.net? Is this what I want? Yeah, that's what I want. All right, so the myq module, remember we instantiate it 3 different times, right? So there's like the hpq, the high priority queue, that's an instantiation of myq. The MPQ, the medium priority queue, that's another instantiation of my queue. And then also LPQ is another instantiation of my queue. So those 3 blocks in this diagram, they really all have exactly the same behavior because they're all just instantiations of exactly the same class.
Hmm.
Okay.
And then the source.
But we treat them a little bit differently, and the way that we treat them differently is like somehow hidden in like the indices that we're using for like the different connections and stuff.
Hmm.
All right.
I'm
So by the way,
guessing
mhm.
that's here, right?
Yeah, so this is where we define all of those connections. So like basically the way that it works in Omnet++ is like you have all these modules, right? They're basically separate universes from one another. They don't directly interact with each other. The only way that they interact with one another is by sending messages. But for us to be able to send messages between modules, we first need to have input and output gates defined on each of those modules. Once you define the input and output gates, then in this like network topology file, you can say like, oh, module A and module B, like they have, mutually input and output gates. And I'm going to connect the input gate to the output gate from one and then, vice versa, basically. And that's what all of this stuff like line 62 to 67 and 70 to 72, all of that is like, oh, I guess, well, really all of it, I mean, even 52 has that keyword connections, right? Like we're
Hmm.
defining all of these connections. These are like all of the possible ways that all of the modules in our simulation can interact with one another. These are like the direct connections. right? So like,
Right.
for example, line 54, we're basically saying whatever the source module thing is, and we haven't talked about that yet, but whatever that thing is, apparently it has an output gate called 2Q. And what
Mm-hmm.
we're saying is that output gate is connected to the high priority queue module and it's from source gate.
That's the source .net, right?
Yeah,
For this
yeah,
one.
and this source thing is also something that we didn't really touch very much. So like sync and source, we didn't touch all that much. And basically, it's like the dual of the sync. I mean, source just generates messages basically out of thin air. Sync just like vaporizes messages. That's pretty much the only point of those two things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so like source, all it does is it generates messages. I forget what we called them, but honestly, it doesn't matter. So it generates messages, and then all it does is just like send them off to the different, priority queues, and that's basically it.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
so
that was the
source.net is not too exciting because it basically just says, hey, I have an output gate and it's I'm just gonna send messages to queues. That's pretty much it.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. I'm just making sure I get every single point that he could possibly ask me.
Yeah, totally.
And then the source is used here, right?
Yeah, so this is
That
like the implementation of the source module. So again, we'll have like the source.h, that's like the interface for the source, or like the specification. But again, it's not very exciting because all it really says is like we're defining this class called source, and it's got these two methods. I mean, basically because it's an Omnet module, it has to have the initialize and the handle message method.
hmm
Those are like the important things from here. Otherwise, it's just like, oh, the constructor for the module, or the destructor for the module. And honestly, we don't even use those things directly. That's just like something for Omnet++ to use. So it's not even important for us.
I think this is the constructor, right? And then the destructor is the one with the little.
So the constructor is 29, just like the name of the class with the parentheses, because like
hmm
basically, it doesn't have any arguments that you give it when you construct the module or an object of this class. Um, and then the destructor is like with the little squiggly in front of it.
hmm This thing right here.
Yeah, yeah, and if I remember correctly, the virtual thing is about like I don't know, we like implemented it somewhere else. But honestly, it's not even important really for what we're doing.
hmm
But
Okay.
yeah, here again, the really the important things are just the initialize method and the handle message method. Those are the two important ones.
Okay. Because they are using the CC,
Yeah, exactly. We
the C++.
actually we actually implement those. And I mean, technically we also implement the constructor and the destructor. But again, all of
Mhm.
that stuff was even there to begin with. So we didn't actually write that. It's just something that Omnet is going to use in its runtime.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is it sends the message. What does this do?
Yeah,
The
so
sends.
so when the source is initialized, it does a couple things. So it sets this send message event variable. And if you go back to where were we? Yeah, we were in the source.h. If you go back to that, we have this send message event like private variable in the source module, right?
hmm
So okay, we have this variable there, but the constructor for a source object didn't give me one of those things. So basically, the way that we'll give that a value is we'll do it in the initialize method, which is sort of what we were doing in source.cc. right? So like, okay, we have this field that's not instantiated at all. There's no value in that variable, and it's a private thing. So I'm not even going to be able to like touch that, uh, variable from like outside of this module. So then, you might wonder like, well, how do we ever set the value of send message event? Well, if we go to the implementation, it'll say when we're initializing the source object, that's when we set this send message event. So like if we're looking at line 30, basically this is our implementation of initialize. The first thing we do is we create a new C message thing with this payload, and the payload is basically irrelevant. But it's like one of these C message type things. That's what we set in the send message event variable. But basically the only reason, well, I think the only reason that we're doing that is so that we have some message to process in the source. We basically need some way to like start the perpetual motion device, right? Because like this source thing is just going to keep generating more and more and more messages, but it's like, but how does it ever generate the first one? Well, it generates the first one in the initialize method. Cool.
Mhm.
And so basically, so what's happening is like when you create this source object, you call this initialize method. Okay, cool. That sets this send message event variable, and it also schedules that thing basically, at time t equals 0 or whatever. Like, I need to handle this message that I have now, which is this send message event thing. And basically, when you have a message scheduled for you, then that's when you call the handle message method. So basically, source, when you create a source object, it immediately schedules itself a message, and then it will handle that message with the handle message method, which is basically all of the next stuff that we'll define.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, but it's not all that exciting because basically it's just gonna send a message on this 2Q channel. That's pretty much all it's doing.
Okay. Great.
And so yeah, so it sends that message with the payload job. And again, these payloads like don't really matter all that much. They're good for debugging, but like it doesn't matter so much what's in those payloads right now. The other important thing that the source module does, so like when we created it, it scheduled itself a message, cool. Then it handles it immediately. And then it basically, in handling that message that it scheduled for itself, it will send this job message, on this 2Q gate. Where does it go? Probably to one of the queues. So it will schedule, it'll send a message on 2Q, and then this very last line is it's basically saying, then it will schedule itself another message for some time in the future, basically.
Mhm.
Right. So it's kind of like the way that the source module works is it's just going to keep generating messages, but the way that it keeps generating messages is every time it handles a message, that's when it sends a message to another module, to the Q module. And after it sends that message, it just schedules another message for itself a little bit into the future. And so then when we get to that time in the simulation, it will again handle that message, send another message to the Q module, and then schedule another message for itself in the future. And then it just keeps doing that.
Mhm. Okay. And does this source thing have a diagram? No, it's just
I mean, not really, because the only truly interesting diagram in our project is that network diagram, because that's the one that says like, hear all of the connections between all of the different modules. And each one
Mm-hmm.
of the modules, like internally, doesn't do anything because they're all simple modules. They're not like you know, they're not so in Omnet, there's a way to basically have so the way that we're using it, it's like every module is kind of like one of these simple modules. And a simple module basically just means it's like, you know, an atom or like an indivisible unit. Like there's no easy, like there's no thing that's less complicated than this simple module in Omnet++. And so you may be thinking like, okay, but then what's like a more complex thing? So a more complex thing is a complex module, and a complex module is basically allowed to have modules inside of it. So it's almost like this network thing is like a complex module because it has, you know, all of these different submodules. They have connections amongst one another. Okay, fine. But you could even in some more complicated simulations, you could even make each one of those modules within the network thing have modules inside of them. So in a way, like each one of these little blocks could be its own little network almost. And you know,
Mm-hmm.
and you can do that kind of like indefinitely. You can just like, you know, nest as deeply as you want these modules. We're not doing it here, but this is possible with this framework.
Okay, cool. And that's it for source, right?
Yeah, that's it for source. Source is not all that exciting. Just like sync, but it doesn't really do a whole lot other than, you know, it generates messages. Basically, that's all it does.
And I think the last
Yeah,
one is this.
yeah.
Okay,
So
cool.
scheduler and MyQ are like by far the most interesting ones because those are the ones that we actually implemented.
Mm-hmm. There's not
Yeah,
this
but
one.
even still with the scheduler, it's just a simple module, so there's nothing really going on inside of it. But yeah, so in the net file for scheduler, as it is in the net file for all of them, it's just like we're just saying what are the input and output gates, more or less. I mean, we're also saying these parameter things, but okay, whatever. So we say the parameters and the input output gates.
Okay. And then the header file, it's just the most important things are the functions, the initialize and the hang on messages, right?
Yep, yep. So we have we also have some private variables in this scheduler module. So apparently we have this self message and gate size and priorities thing. Um,
Hmm.
but really the most important aspect of any of these modules is just like the initialize and handle message methods, and really how we implement them is the important part.
Okay. And I think we then use this one because there was something going on with the gate size, right? The user weights.
I don't think we used that one because we just got the like the round robin scheduling. Well, we just got
Okay.
like the priority scheduling. We didn't do anything in terms of like waiting messages or anything like that. I think there
Okay.
was another suggestion of how one might implement the
Oh,
scheduler in a
right.
different way, and I think that involved these user weights. But again, this is something that just existed in that file and
Mm-hmm.
was commented out, and we just didn't use. I mean, you could delete it. Like we're not going to use it in our implementation. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just gonna keep it here just in case. And then the construction and destructure with the little
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and again, that's not even something that we really deal with. It's kind of just like for the ONET runtime.
Um, okay. And then the CC.
Yeah, and so like where the business is and all of this stuff is really in this like myq.cc and scheduler.cc, right? Because these are like the
Mm-hmm.
implementations of these things. Um, And so in a similar way to the source module, the scheduler module, when it's initialized, it also does this thing where it like schedules itself a message immediately. And if you can see, like, look past all of the junk in the body of this handle message at line 57, it's going to do some stuff, and ultimately it's just going to schedule itself another message. Right, it's going to wait some time, you know, schedule it in the future. But the point being is like the scheduler needs to like always be checking, you know, like, hey, does anybody need to offload messages? And the way that it's going to do that is essentially when one of these queues, one of these priority queues, when it gets messages from the user, it notifies the scheduler. And so basically the next time the scheduler processes one of its self messages, and you could think of these self messages as sort of just like a timing mechanism, you know, like the time span in between the scheduler processing like the nth self message and the n plus first self message is you know, you can just call that a scheduling cycle, right? So like there's some window of time in which some things can happen, and then basically the scheduler doesn't like react immediately to events. It waits until, you know, this new scheduling cycle, and then it basically says like, all right, now let me check what happened in that previous scheduling cycle, and like now let's schedule who gets to offload their messages, basically. Right. And so really all it's doing is, so this whole first like conditional from like 43 to 57 is basically just about processing the self message, right? So we'll talk about that in 1 second. The more interesting thing that happens is when the scheduler is getting a message from one of these priority queues. And really all it's doing when it receives a message from the, you know, the low, medium, or high priority queue is it's just going to delete the message that it got, because again, we don't really care what the messages are here. Like the payload's irrelevant. We're just using these messages to kind of like signify that some event happened, but you know, there's sort of only they're like binary events, you know. It's like it's not that complicated in the sense of like we don't care about the payload, it's just that we got the message that matters. But basically all the scheduler is doing here is like, if it got a message from the low priority queue, like we'll set some you know, boolean to true for the low priority queue, you know, similarly with the medium priority queue, similarly with the high priority queue. Right, so basically this priorities array is just like 3 Boolean values, and essentially the only point of those Boolean values is to say whether or not we got a message from that priority queue, right? And again, I don't remember if 0 is low or high, but it's, you know,
I think we
it's
chose
1.
as low.
Yeah, I think so as
Medium
well.
or
I
high.
just don't remember, but let's just say that's what we did for right now, because it doesn't really matter, honestly. So like, you know, if the scheduler received a message from the low priority queue, well, okay, it just deletes that message, because again, the contents of the message aren't really important. It's just that we got a message from the low priority queue, and all we do is we set that you know, priorities variable to true for the low priority queue, and that's it.
Okay.
But now when that scheduling cycle is over, and now the scheduler goes to check like, who did I receive messages from in that previous scheduling cycle, now that's what all of this first stuff is about, because this is when the scheduler is processing one of these self messages. And
That's
basically
here, right?
so it's like line 43 to 57. So when
Oh,
the scheduler processes a self message, and we know it's a self message because we're saying if message equal self message. So the only way that message will be equal to a self message is if it's one of these messages that the scheduler gave to itself, essentially. So okay, we know that like a certain amount of time has passed since the last one of these self messages, and so it's possible that we've received some messages that need to be scheduled from the priority queues. And so essentially what we're doing is then just checking like, oh, did we receive messages from the low priority queue? If we did, we maybe zero is high priority, and I think that's why we check it in this order. So priority zero is like, did we receive messages from the high priority queue? If that's false, well, obviously we don't go into like the body of the conditional. We just go to like the else statement. Um, so we just pass the high priority queue. If we didn't get any messages from the high priority queue, there are no high priority messages to schedule, so we don't do anything. But then we just need to check like, oh, did we get any medium priority queues? And that's what we do with if priority is 1. If we
mhm.
did, well, okay, then we set it to false because we're just resetting everything. And then we send a message to that particular index on the to the queue module, right? So like the gate called toQ in the scheduler is like, I want to send a message to one of the queues. It's either going to be high, medium, or low priority, and which one it is depends on which index I send it to, right? So here when we do send CMD, so CMD is just the message. So send CMD 2Q, 2Q is the gate, and then one is like, this message will be for the medium priority queue,
Okay.
right? And so pretty much the logic is just like the scheduler will schedule itself a message. It's a special message that only it can send itself. So it'll schedule a message for itself. A certain amount of time will go by, and in which it'll be handling messages potentially from the queues. Once it sees the message from itself, now it checks like, hey, did I get any messages from high, medium, or low priority queues? If I did, whichever the highest priority queue is that I got messages from, I'll tell them to offload their messages. So I send this CMD message to them. And then
Mhm.
I just schedule myself another message. So I basically can just keep doing exactly the same thing, right? Like I see some messages from the priority queues. Okay, cool. I adjust the variables the way I need to. Oh, here's the message from myself. Now I need to check if I got anything from the priority queues in the meantime. Whoever
And
the
that's here,
highest
right?
priority queue I got was. Sorry, what was that?
That's here, right?
Yeah,
The
so this
thing.
junk is all about like if we got a message from the high priority queue, well, we just delete the message because it doesn't matter, and then we just set that priorities like the high priority variable to true, basically. So that
Okay.
and we do that so that when the scheduler processes the self message, it will trigger that conditional thing, right? Because like if we've set priorities to 0 previously, and now we're processing this self message, then when we get to line 44 and we see if priority is 0, well, priority 0 is true now because we just set it to true. Then we'll go into the conditional and we'll do all of that stuff, right? So like we'll reset the priorities variable. Like I'm processing it now. I want to set it to false, and then I'll
Mhm.
send a message to that corresponding queue.
Okay.
Yeah,
That makes a lot more sense now.
yeah, cool. Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And that's really all the scheduler is doing. It's really very simple. Once you can kind of see past all of these like nested if
If
else
else,
things,
if
and
yeah,
yeah, and if you remember, it was only, and I don't know why this is the case, but it was only because it would not work with a for loop, and I have no clue why. We should be able to write both of those things as for loops, but it just
yeah,
would not let us do that. Um, but this worked, so all right, cool. We went with it, and yeah, that's just how it is.
and I think that's all. Because if it's just my queue and scheduler,
Yep.
then the sink and the source and don't really
Yeah,
affect
yeah.
that much.
Yeah, I mean, really, so all this thing does is, it receives messages from the queues and then just like deletes them. That's it. Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Not that's it, but it also logs like the lifetime of the message, so we have some statistical information. Okay, cool. Uh,
Okay.
all the source does is just continuously generates messages. Like that is literally all that thing does.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will say, with a caveat, but so yes, that is all the source thing does, but the way that it does it, because the only way anything happens in Omnet++ is via message passing. The way that the source module generates messages is it keeps generating self messages so that every time it processes a self message, it will also send a message to the queue thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it. And then I think we didn't exactly talk about all of like the implementation details of MyQ, but I don't think it's like particularly it's that's not so crazy. I mean, basically all that's happening here is we're gonna process a message that came from the source a little bit differently than we'll process if it came from the scheduler, and that's pretty much it. I mean, like if it came from the source, we queue it up in our queue. If it came from the scheduler, then that's what's gonna signal us to empty our queue, and that's pretty much all that's happening.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that was one of the questions that he asked me. What
Hmm.
was the difference between? I think I knew how to answer this one, but I don't remember. But it
Yeah.
was definitely what was the difference between from source and from scheduler.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And
So
that's when he made
that's.
me open
Mhm.
the NEDs.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because we did change all of the names of all of these gates. So he certainly has every right to be asking questions like, "What the heck
Oh
is
yeah.
all of this?" But quite frankly, I think that we improved the naming. I don't really care for like the TXRX thing. I don't. What does that even mean, really? From
Yeah.
scheduler is like how much more clear could you be where as to where that information came from. So,
Yeah. I think he's the only person that knew what TX
mhm.
and RX stand for.
It may be like a convention, that I just don't particularly care for, but there's no reason to force you to use a convention
Yeah.
when there's something that makes way more sense in my mind, at least.
But at least he recognized that there were change and he said it was fine. It really doesn't matter what the names are
Yeah,
at all.
totally.
So
Yep,
yeah.
I agree.
Um, one final thing, I think we mentioned 1 second about this.
Yeah.
What is this? I think you told me once, but I forgot. The
Yeah,
ANF.
I think if I remember correctly, I think that was something to do with the statistics that we were
Oh yeah.
collecting. And I don't remember if you were able to view that the way I was expecting you to be able to view it. Interesting.
Yeah, so
Yes, so if you I don't remember exactly what order of things you need to do to get these statistics files to
Hmm.
collect the way you want them. I think I remember sending some resources though, and I definitely was just using those resources because I hadn't done any of the statistics collection before.
Okay.
But the what I remember is you basically tell it like I think it's before you run the simulation like, hey, I want to collect this type of or make this type of actually, hold on. No, maybe you just need to do a simulation, let it run for a little bit so it can collect those lifetimes. And then I think you have the ability to tell it like, oh, I want a scatter plot or like a bar graph or whatever of the information.
And that's I think here, right? No, that's just the way it looks like. Unless it's here. Yes, okay.
I think you have to get out of this simulation though, so you can stop it. It's probably enough.
Okay. And then here, right?
Yeah, I don't remember if it's with this .anf thing here. Let me find the yeah. So this is what opened when you clicked on this schedule one.anf thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it opened on inputs. No, on browse data. This is
Okay.
what it opened on, and then I just click on
Hmm.
charts. Yeah.
Yeah, so okay, if you go to charts, does it allow you to display any information? The
So
result
I can
filter.
open the charts, but I don't know if I don't know how to display.
Yeah, that's strange. And I don't remember at the moment how I got that to work. But there are some links in just a little bit like previous around the 15th of December. I sent a couple messages. So one was like tic-tac-toe,
Uh-huh.
I guess sorry, TikTok tutorial, and then there's like a YouTube video, and I don't remember what the YouTube video is at the moment, but between the
Yeah.
two of those resources, I was able to figure out how to display that information. So I don't think there's any issue other than we just need to know exactly what to click to display the information that we need.
Hmm. Yeah, I'll just look at the. Oh no.
Yeah, it's not too complicated. It's just a matter of like how you tell it to give you the right diagram, basically.
So it's something with Omnet. Yeah. I just
Yeah.
realized because I clicked on one button on the charts thing, and it completely
Hmm.
crashed. And
Yeah.
it's not letting me exit the simulation. Yeah. So it's yeah,
Something with that just doesn't surprise me all
just
that much. Yeah, do occasionally.
this is it. And, yep. That was the thing. Okay. Yeah. I think
Yeah,
that
cool. Okay. So yeah, did
is
that answer all of your questions, or do you have some others?
no, I think that answered pretty much everything. I just want to make sure it runs. Now it runs that it opens up correctly.
Yeah.
Okay.
good.
It does have some issues, but uh, they're not that big.
Mhm.
They're minor issues with the opening, but yeah. So it
Yeah.
was some button here on this where these settings are. I clicked on it and it
Mm.
crashed.
Mm.
So yeah.
Oh, it may, what is that? So there's like a yellow, red, green, like plus thing. Just hover over it. Yeah, maybe try that one.
Okay.
Yeah, this looks like what I was doing, and yeah, you should be able to just like select, and I don't know what the right one is, but you can kind of play with a few things here. Yeah, this is weird. I'm not sure what's going on with that. I feel like that kind of thing worked when I did it, but
Maybe it was working on a specific machine,
yeah, and
and
maybe
then
I
was it go
think
Windows?
yeah, I think I did it on my Linux machine, if I
Hmm.
remember correctly.
Yeah, but he wasn't too worried about that, at least for
Okay,
me.
okay, okay, cool.
So yeah, he just
Yeah.
looked at the implementation, the way that it ran. He said it's
Hmm.
fine,
Cool.
and yeah,
Yeah,
I
very
got
good.
maximum grade on it. I got the
Hey, all right.
perfect grade.
That's the important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, that's good
So
news.
thank you so much for everything.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Alex.
I guess if something else pops up, I can just contact you through Wisdom, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll keep checking my messages and stuff. So yeah, at any point in time.
Okay. Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you so
All
much.
right.